Welcome to Experience Edinburgh. Are you planning a trip to Edinburgh and fascinated by witches? Are you looking for the city's most intriguing historical sites, the unique shops, the magic museums and scary graveyards? Or perhaps you practice witchcraft yourself or simply curious about the history behind Scotland's witches? If so, you are in the right place. One of the first locations would be the Witch's Well, located near the entrance up to the castle just to the right. Now, before we explore Edinburgh's witch history, it's really important to remember that these weren't really witches. They were just ordinary people, most of them women, who became victims of fear, superstition and politics. Between 1563 and 1736, around 4,000 people were accused of witchcraft in Scotland, and around 2/3 of those were actually tried and executed. In Edinburgh alone, it is believed that more than 300 people were executed here on Castle Hill, making it one of the country's most notorious execution sites. Now, people could be accused of almost anything: healing with herbs, arguing with a neighbour, owning a cat, or simply just being different. Once accused, many were imprisoned and subjected to brutal interrogation, including sleep deprivation and torture, until they confessed. Those found guilty were usually strangled at the stake before their bodies were burned, although a small number were burned alive. The memorial here is known as the Witch's Well. It was created in 1894 by Sir Patrick Geddes and designed by an artist called John Duncan. It was close to where many of the executions took place. You'll often see fresh flowers left here, not because it's an official tradition, but because visitors often come to pay their respects to the innocent victims whose lives were taken during Scotland's witch trials. The flowers have become a quiet symbol of remembrance and compassion. You may also hear the name Clara Gozin. She was one of the many women accused of witchcraft in Edinburgh, and like countless others, her story reminds us that these victims were real people, with families and lives, not the mythical witches of legend. Today, this memorial stands not as a celebration of witchcraft, but as a reminder of one. The first is the Witchery Shop, located just a short walk from Edinburgh Castle. Now, despite the name, it's actually much more focused on traditional Scottish gifts than modern witchcraft, Scottish keepsakes, and a variety of locally inspired souvenirs. It's a great place to pick up a gift or a memento from your trip, even if you're not specifically interested in witchcraft. However, if you're looking for something much more connected to modern witchcraft, then Black Moon Botanica is definitely worth a visit. Now, as soon as you walk in, it's clear that this shop is created for practicing witches, pagans, and anyone interested in spiritual or occult traditions. One thing that's important to mention is this modern practice is very different from the so-called witches who were persecuted in Scotland hundreds of years ago. Shops like this represent modern and spiritual beliefs and practices, not the old traditional ones where they were executed during the lives of the witch trials. Now, inside you'll find a huge range of incense, sage bundles and cleansing products, all intended for rituals, meditation and spiritual practices. There are sprays, oils, creams and balms designated to cleanse spaces, ward off negative energy and promote protection and well-being. The shop also stocks herbs in individual bags, along with books explaining how different herbs have traditionally been used in spell work and rituals. You'll also find some potions, spell ingredients and products inspired by occult botany, making it a fascinating place to explore whether you're a practicing witch or just, once again, simply curious. Now, one thing that really stood out was the impressive collection of tarot cards. There are dozens of different decks to choose from, whether you're an experienced reader or just starting out. They also advertise tarot card readings, workshops and community events, giving visitors the chance to experience more than just the shop itself. Another highlight was the selection of metallic candles, each intended for different rituals and intentions, alongside crystals, gemstones and jewellery. Now, many of the stones come with information explaining their traditional meanings, from protection and healing to confidence, love and, of course, good fortune. Now, whether you believe in their spiritual properties or just simply interested in their beauty, it is really interesting collection to browse anyway. Now, the book selection is probably one of the best I've seen. There are shelves packed with books covering the history of witchcraft, the origins of pagan tradition, herbalism, spellcraft, tarot cards, and folklore, along with a guide for anyone wanting to learn more about modern witchcraft. Now, if you are history-loving or folklore or modern paganism, or you're just simply discovering some of Edinburgh's most unique independent shops, well, Black Moon Botanica is definitely worth adding to your itinerary. If you are enjoying the video, don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification button. The Museum of Magic, Fortune Telling and Witchcraft is definitely worth adding to your list. Located just off the Royal Mile, this museum costs around £7.50 for adults, with discounted tickets available for children, students and families. Although it's not a huge museum, it's absolutely packed with artefacts and displays, and it's easy to spend over an hour exploring everything inside. They also offer tarot card readings as well. Now, before you enter the museum itself, you notice they also sell pagan tartan. Now, unlike traditional Scottish tartan, pagan tartan was created as a symbol for modern pagans and witches, representing a shared spiritual identity rather than family heritage. Inside the museum, it's home to hundreds of objects collected from across Britain and around the world. It was founded by historian and Scottish ethnologist Ash William Mills, whose collection spans decades of research into folklore, magic, fortune-telling and witchcraft. One of the first displays explores the image of the devil. Now, during the European witch trials, people believed witches made pacts with the devil, and many confessions, often forced through torture, included stories of meeting him. Now, the museum displays artworks, carvings, and even a ceremonial chair associated with those beliefs, showing just how deeply fear of the devil influenced attitude towards witchcraft. As you continue through the museum, you'll come across a timeline showing how beliefs into witchcraft have evolved over thousands of years. It follows the journey from ancient folklore, tradition, and pagan beliefs through the witchcraft of Europe and into the rise of modern paganism and Wicca during the 20th century. One figure who played a huge role in Scotland's witch trials was King James VI of Scotland, who later became James I of England. After becoming convinced that witches had tried to sink the ship carrying his wife back from Denmark, he developed an intense fear of witchcraft. In 1597, he published a book called Daemonology, encouraging the persecution of witches and influencing trials across Scotland. During his reign, accusations and executions increased dramatically. The museum also explores the history of fortune-telling, something that has been fascinating people for centuries. From palm reading and crystal glazing to astrology, many cultures believe it was possible to glimpse into the future. One of the most recognizable methods is tarot, with beautifully illustrated cards on display, showing how tarot has evolved from a card game into a tool used today for reflection and spiritual guidance. Another section focuses on voodoo, or more accurately, Vodou, a religion that developed in Haiti by blending West African spiritual traditions with Christianity. Most popular culture often portrays voodoo as dark magic. The real religion centers on community, ancestors, healing, and spirituality. The museum helps separate these myths from reality. You'll also find displays filled with charms and amulets. For thousands of years, people believed that they carried these small objects that protects them from illness, bad luck, and evil spirits. Now, whether they were made from metal, stone, bone, or wood, these protective items can be found in cultures all over the world. Herbal magic is also featured heavily throughout the museum. Now, long before modern medicine, herbs were used for healing, rituals, and protection. One exhibit also explains how red hair has become linked with witchcraft. Now, during the witch trials, anyone who looked to behave differently became a target. Although having red hair wasn't enough on its own to lead to an accusation, unusual physical features often fueled suspicion and added to the myth surrounding witches. One of the museum's most unusual exhibits is a mummified cat. Now, these cats were sometimes hidden inside the walls or roofs of houses during the 16th and 17th century. Now, people believe they acted as protective charms, guarding homes against evil spirits, witches, and bad luck. Towards the end of the museum, you find one of the most famous artifacts, what is claimed to be the world's oldest Ouija board. Now, spirit boards became especially popular during the Victorian era, when interest in seances and communicating with the dead grew rapidly. Now, whether you believe they work or not, they do remain one of the history's most recognizable occult objects and continue to fascinate visitors to this day. Overall, this museum does do an excellent job of separating historical facts from myth. Rather than celebrating witchcraft, it explores centuries of folklore, superstition, religion, and human beliefs. Whether you're interested in Scotland's witch trials, fortune-telling, modern paganism, or simply used to the strange objects people have used throughout history, it's one of history's and Edinburgh's most unique museums. At Experience Edinburgh, we also do tours along the Royal Mile, talking about the wonderful history that it holds, speaking of both facts and legends. The link is in the description. Now, our final stop is Canongate Kirkyard, one of Edinburgh's oldest and most atmospheric graveyards. The church itself dates back to 1688, and the kirkyard has been used as a place of burial ever since. Today, it's the final resting place of famous figures including the economist Adam Smith and poet Robert Ferguson, but it's also a place filled with centuries of Scottish history. Now, despite what some ghost tours might tell you, there isn't any evidence that Canongate Kirkyard was a site where witches were executed or buried. However, graveyards like this have been long associated with witchcraft, folklore, and the supernatural belief for hundreds of years. People believe the boundary between the living and the dead was much thinner in places like this, which is why it's so related. In Scottish folklore, graveyards were often thought to be places where spirits lingered, where ghosts could appear, and where magic rituals could take place after dark. They were seen as powerful places because they connected the physical world with the spiritual one. Now, many of these beliefs weren't unique to Scotland. They can be found all throughout Europe, but Edinburgh's dark history helped strengthen these legends over the centuries. Even after the witch trials ended, graveyards continued to inspire ghost stories and local legends. Standing among the weathered gravestones, it's easy to understand why. The old monuments, quiet pathways, and centuries of history creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in Edinburgh. It's also a lot quieter than Greyfriars Kirkyard, a much more famous one in Edinburgh, so if you are looking for a quiet walk or curious about the people buried here, chances are you'll be doing it in peace. You can also enter the church free of charge. You can see the beautiful architecture and sit down for yourself.